For the second time this week, BYU offensive coordinator Jeff Grimes is with us on BYU Sports Nation. This time he is in Studio B and looking fresh, Coach. We heard that the mustache was gone when you told us on the phone. Now, I believe this is your first national television public appearance post-mustache. Is that correct?
I guess so. I don't keep track of that sort of thing, but yeah, probably so.
How do you feel about it?
You know what? I made a deal with my wife, who hates my mustache, by the way. I made a deal with her that I would shave it at the end of the season, so the day after the bowl game, it was gone. But
any chance it may make another appearance this season?
I would this coming season,
or just in the future.
Well, you know, it showed up in August. August-ash was when our offensive staff decided to start that, and so I would say that there might be a possibility of recurrence sometime in the future.
Okay, we're going to go through all of the offensive guys that are a part of the signing class for BYU, but before we get into the details of that, I want to get your take on how you measure success on a signing day. When do you sit back and think, yeah, that was a successful signing day?
Yeah, in most places you would measure it 3 or 4 or 5 years down the road. Here, that might be 6 or 7 years down the road. Honestly, everybody has great things to say about their signing class on signing day, and we certainly feel that way, or we wouldn't have recruited these guys. But I've been doing this thing long enough to know that sometimes guys surprise you, and I think in our case, maybe more so than others, those are pleasant surprises, but sometimes players disappoint you and may take a little bit longer to develop or may not ever quite become a fit for you. And I've been in the situation where we took a guy last minute, last second take at the 12th hour, so to speak, the night before signing day. And I had been recruiting other guys who were 4- and 5-star guys for a couple of years. And then that late take, the guy that not nearly as many people were after, ended up outperforming the other guys. And so there are so many factors that go into a player's development and eventual effectiveness that you really don't know, at least until a year or two down the road.
As you mentioned, you're certainly no stranger to recruiting. You're no stranger to recruiting at BYU. What aspect of BYU strikes the biggest chord with recruits?
I think for the right kids, this is a perfect fit. And then for a lot of kids, it's not a fit at all. And so when you find that match between BYU and everything that it stands for and what we want to do as a football program and what we want to stand for and being an ambassador for the school, when you find that matched with a young man who wants to be a part of something like that and it fits his personality and his moral code and his athleticism, then that's something really cool.
How receptive are the recruits now that they have seen what you want to do on offense and have a year of tape to watch on BYU football? How has that changed your recruiting philosophy, if you will?
At least they have something to look at, and we can point to, I think, a marked improvement. Although certainly have a lot of room to grow, which sometimes can be a positive too. We can still point to needs that we definitely have on our offense. But last year there were still a lot of questions about what exactly is the offense going to look like, and there were a couple of players who had been very interested in BYU for a long time but weren't quite ready to commit or sign until they found out a little bit more about it. And so there were some guys last year, Gunnar Romney and I can't remember who else. There were a couple of other guys that Dallin Holker that in those last couple of weeks pushed our way and committed once we had an opportunity to spend some time with them and talk to them about what we're doing. Obviously this year we have more to go on.
Sure. BYU offensive coordinator Jeff Grimes with us on signing day. Let's go through the signing class. We'll start with the gentlemen that inked their names on the dotted line back in December, starting with a highly touted quarterback, Jacob Conover out of Arizona. For somebody that is new to BYU football and new to Jacob Conover, how would you explain what he brings to BYU football?
Well, it always starts with the quarterback, right? And so I'm glad we're starting with him. But Jacob is a guy that soon after I got this job, I heard about him and went and saw him when we were recruiting Gunner. Saw him at the high school, saw him in the weight room lifting weights, which is probably not the best place to evaluate Jake Conover. Okay, he's not an extremely big guy and not the most physically impressive looking guy, but had a real personality, a real confidence about him, but not braggadocious in any way. Very comfortable in his own skin. And so then I had an opportunity to come back and watch him practice in the spring, and I watched the entire practice. I watched from warm-ups all the way to the very end. I saw him throw individual cuts with receivers. I saw him throw routes on air, 7-on-7, 1-on-1s, team, and in about a 2-hour practice, I never saw him make a bad throw. Not one throw was outside the normal catching radius of what you would expect a receiver to catch the ball in. And so was just really impressed with his accuracy, even more impressed with his personality and how he related to everybody that was around him. Little kids who would come up and talk to him who just happened to be there watching practice, parents, his teammates, his coaches. Just a great deal of respect for everybody that he spoke with, and a real comfort level. And so I think he's got natural leadership.
Let's talk about 3 offensive linemen, something you know a little bit about. Blake Freeland, Brock Gunderson, and Eli Unatoa. What can you tell us about those 3 offensive linemen?
Well, first, they all 3 fit the eyeball test. If they walked into the room, you say, "Oh, those are some big dudes right there." And obviously we like that. Size isn't everything, but it's the starting point for offensive linemen. And, I think that's one thing that should be a strength for us here at BYU. We should be able to match up with people in most cases in terms of size and length. And so these 3 guys all do that. I'm just looking at the list here. So Brock Gunderson, more of an interior player. He played tackle in high school. I think he'll be a guard, maybe a center. He's bigger than that now. He's probably 6'4", 290, 95. Kind of a throwback, an old school player, just a mauler. You put him in a phone booth with a guy and you feel very confident about who's coming out of there. Plays in a triple option offense, which some guys don't like. It doesn't really bother me because it gives him a chance to show his aggression. And, I heard an old coach say once, I'd rather put a bit in his mouth than a foot in his rear end, and so I'd rather have to teach a guy to pass block than take a guy who's more of a finesse player and have to teach him how to run block, because you don't know if that guy has that. If a guy has enough athleticism, then you can teach him how to pass block. But if he doesn't show you that aggression, then it's hard to know whether he'll ever be the tough guy that you want. And so I like his toughness, and I like who he is as a player. Blake Freeland, really, really big, tall kid, a little bit of a projection, but like a lot of the best offensive linemen I've ever coached, played other positions.
Yeah, he was a
along the way.
stand-up defensive lineman in high school.
Yeah, and a tight end and a quarterback the years before that. A really big athlete, runs well, catches the ball well, got good hands. I watched him play basketball, and, sometimes you watch a big lineman prospect play basketball, and they're there just to play defense and use up their fouls. But that's not him. He's a good basketball player, moves well on the floor and throws down dunks every game.
Yeah, the drop step dunk.
Yeah, absolutely has that. And I like his competitive spirit. Really competitive. I think the game means a lot to him, and you can see that in the way that he plays. But I think he's going to be an excellent offensive tackle. And then Eli Unatoa, similar in terms of size. A really good athlete for his size. He's probably, I'd say, at least 6'5", maybe 6'6", and in that 290, 95 range. Really good athlete, light on his feet, and I think a guy that's gonna just be huge. I think by the time he's done playing, I mean, he looks lean at 290 pounds right now, almost thin. By the time he's in his second or third year, he'll probably be a 330-pound guy and still look lean and be able to move. And his dad played here, so comes from great bloodlines. It's just a great family, and really glad to have him.
Yeah, it's good to see those legacy ties continue for BYU football, especially on the offensive line. Now for a couple of tight ends, Ethan Erickson and Carter Wheat. Joining a group that was pretty productive for you last year. What do you think about these 2 tight ends coming in? I
think they fit well with what BYU has always had, and that's all-purpose tight ends who can do a lot of things. I'll talk about Carter first. I recruited him. He's from my area in Arizona, and went by and saw him the same time that I first got to know know Jacob January of his junior year, and he looked okay. And then I went back in May, and he looked better. He was growing, and he was filling out. But was in a high school program, a really good program, Red Mountain High School, really well coached by Mike Peterson. But I don't think had kind of come into his own yet as a junior. And so I went and watched him practice in the spring, and he was hurt, and so didn't get to see him do much. And so we said, okay, come to camp. And he came to camp and just blew us away. Really impressed with his athleticism and his toughness. And I think he's that guy that can be equal part blocker and equal part receiver, which is really important for us. And I think he's got the right mindset. So looking forward to him joining us. And then Ethan Erickson, honestly, we didn't know a whole lot about until he showed up at camp this summer. He showed up, and he's a little bit leaner and still will need to fill out a little bit more. And you can see his athleticism. I watched him play basketball, really light on his feet, runs the court really well. But for a guy that's tall and lean like he is, we in camp, we put him in there and told him, hey, put your hand in the dirt and go block this defensive end right here, and really did a nice job. Wasn't scared. Matter of fact, liked it. Hey, coach, can I do that some more? Awesome. Yeah, come on in here.
He comes from a run-heavy program at Kahuku.
Yeah, he does. But in a couple of years when he gets back, I think he's gonna be a fine player for us too. Really happy with both those guys. And at that position, we got 3 guys coming back from missions, and so we're going to have a lot of competition at tight end this fall, so it'll be fun.
Before we let you go, I wanted to ask you about the 2 wide receivers, Keanu Hill out of Texas, and then Chase Roberts, the local stud from American Fork. What can you tell us about both those receivers?
Well, Keanu is a guy that we got to know early in recruiting. Ryan Pugh did a really nice job recruiting him, getting to know his family. Comes from a really good pedigree. His dad was a great player at Texas Tech, and Mom was an athlete as well. And he's just a really good all-around athlete. He does a lot of things well. He has good hands, runs routes well, not afraid to block and mix it up. Comes from a tough program, and so I think he's a tough-minded guy that'll bring something to the table in terms of his competitiveness and toughness. I like him a lot, like his confidence, like his personality. And then Chase, obviously, we've been recruiting for a long time. I got to see him a lot because my son goes to American Fork and played on the team, so I got to see every Friday night game that we were in town for. And golly, guy's special. He's a great combination of size, speed, and hands.
His catch radius is crazy.
Yeah, it really is. And I saw him a couple times this year get hurt and play injured, not let it bother him, take some really big shots over the middle, and not be afraid to go up and get the ball and then come back in the next series and go do it again. But just a great young man, another legacy whose dad played here, and just a great kid and a great athlete, and can't wait to get him back here.
Outstanding in-depth look at the offensive signees with offensive coordinator Jeff Grimes on BYU Sports Nation. And last but not least, the 2 guys that we mentioned just moments ago that have signed their names today, Luke Andrada and Javel Brown. Luke, of course, is a multifaceted player. He was a quarterback in high school. He's listed as a running back, wide receiver, and then Javel is a big bruising back. What do you think about these 2 guys, and where do you plan on using them?
Well, I think first, both those guys improve our team speed. Both those guys fit a need that we have, which is improving our overall speed. And I think both of them could play a number of different positions. Luke, we see as being a guy, he played quarterback in high school, and you can see him do all sorts of things on film. So we could see him fitting in at running back or receiver, and if you were defensively inclined, you might say he could play DB as well, but I don't care about any of that. I want to see him run with the ball in his hands, and that's what he wants too, so I think it's going to work out just fine for us. And then Javel is a guy that played a lot of positions too. Played all over the field. I said, "How does your coach how do you decide where you play?" He goes, "Coach just tells me where to go each play, and I go there and do whatever he tells me to." And really kind of a cool perspective on the game. But really excited about his athleticism and his upside. I think he's a guy that has great size and good speed, and I think he's a guy that will continue to really develop in the next couple of years, and again could play a number of different positions.
Coach, great to have you with us. We appreciate the time and the insight into all of these guys, and know this is an exciting day. And I hope for your sanity and sake, you get some really relaxing days off here coming up after an intense recruiting period.
We will have a few of those, and then before long we'll be ready to go for spring ball.
All right.
Thanks, Coach.
Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks for having me.